Welcome back to the channel. This is The Casuals. I'm Jin,
And I'm Saki.
and today's episode is Adventure Memories. And so, it's not gonna be. So, every adventure memory that we have can be vastly different or maybe interconnected with each other, but this time, this one's gonna be, I think, very different from our previous adventure memories. It has nothing to do with food this time, and it has a lot to do with, I guess, simple, not simple, but man, it's a really weird story of how it came to be. So, gosh, this was, I would say, 5 years ago. Probably, would you say 5 years ago when this happened?
Maybe longer.
Yeah, but probably 5 years, maybe 6 years ago. And so, this was when Xbox and consoles in general, Xbox and PlayStations were very prominent. Back in the day, where there was sell out and everything, all that stuff. And so, I think one day we just happened to be. I forgot what exactly the reason was, but we decided to go to a GameStop. I don't remember which specific GameStop or which specific reason why we ended up at GameStop, but we just ended up there, and we were browsing around, looking around for whatever possible deals that could have been there. Realistic speaking, though, every time we've done that, we don't really buy anything. It's very rare for us to buy. We just look, it's kind of like the shopper's habit of just looking at things, just to look at them. And I think I remember it was getting close to winter, like the winter sales, wasn't it? Like the Christmas sales.
I believe so, yeah.
It was really cold during that time. And so, I don't know who spotted it first. I think it was you. Do you remember if you spotted the deal first that we're about to talk about?
Yeah, I believe I was looking online for my purchase. I was looking for a console in particular, and then I believe I was looking online and I stumbled across that deal we'll cover in a minute.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, weren't you originally looking for like a what's it called, Halo Xbox edition or something like that?
Yes, I was looking for the Halo Xbox One edition.
So, when you got to GameStop, a lot of things happened during that time we went to GameStop. Would you like to elaborate on that? Because this is more about, your side of the things.
Yeah, of course. So, this was about maybe a year after the Xbox One, the original version, the big fat chunky boy. About a year after its release, and I just Googled it. It was released in 2013, so this was about 2014, 2015-ish
Hmm.
when I stumbled upon it. So I was looking for an Xbox One because it was the new console, and I was still on the old version, the Xbox 360, and all my friends already moved over to the Xbox One, so I couldn't really play games with them anymore. So I was like, all right, I gotta find an Xbox One because I have friends and I want to play with them. Yes, I had friends. Anyways, so I'm like, okay, I'm looking around online. I'm checking Best Buy. I'm checking, anywhere, Target, Walmart, if anyone has one. Of course, they weren't really available. And so I go to GameStop because, when it was still kind of around, because it's slowly dying out now, but when it was still around, they had a deal. It was a buy two get one free deal, and that I believe was for games as well, but it applied to consoles. And I was like, oh, I can buy an Xbox One and like a PlayStation 4 or a Wii U and get the other for free. I'm like, okay. So I was looking and I talked to Jen about it. I was like, hey, they have a deal where you could buy two, get one free, and it applies with the consoles. So I can get all three consoles for the price of two. And you were like, no way. And so we were planning to go out. This was, Yeah, a long time ago. This was before either of us could, drive. So I remember your mom wanted to go to a mall, so she dropped us off at a GameStop, and she went to the mall, and we were there. Now we were in there like what, 5 hours maybe total.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah, we first got in there, and we just browsed, like normal customers. And then I started talking to you about if I should get the deal because it was gonna be a lot of money. It came out to be like $500 to $600 because it's 3 consoles. And so I was like, that's a lot of money to invest. I was like, how often am I gonna play? I do have a rule myself of as long as I can find 5 games that I would play, I will buy the console. Otherwise, I don't think it'll be worth. So I went through my head. I'm like, okay, I'll play Halo, I'll play Borderlands, I'll play all these other games. And I'm like, should I do it? And you were like, well, it's up to you. I'm like, thanks, that helped a lot. So we were in there, maybe half hour passed. I was still thinking about it. And then you were just like, you know what? This deal will probably never happen again. Just go for it. And I was like, you're right. I was gonna eventually get, all the consoles eventually. So I was like, you know what? You're right. I got them. I went up. I purchased all of them. So I bought an Xbox, and I had to buy the PlayStation 4, and they gave me a Wii U for free because it was cheaper. Of course, they make you buy the more expensive one. So I bought those two. I got a free Wii U, but I already had a Wii U. So I was like, I'll just sell it to someone for, $300 when it was $300. So I really am only paying for one console, and I got 2 for free.
Yep. And if I remember correctly, the PlayStation 4 was actually also a special edition.
Yes, it was. It was the Destiny version. It was the white one. I didn't play Destiny, but one of my friends, well, I don't really talk to that person anymore, but one of my friends was super into Destiny, and he was like, I will pay you for it. And I was like, if you have a PlayStation 4, like a black version, the black color one, I'm like, I'll just trade you. I don't care what it looks like. I just want one. And he was like, all right, give me some time to think. We never ended up trading. I don't know why. I really didn't care, but he just never came in fruition. But anyways, back to our story. So I bought both consoles. I got the free Wii U, and then we were like, okay, I bought it. It's secure. Your mom was still gonna be at the mall for like 2 more hours or so,
Yeah.
2 to 3 hours, and we're like, oh, okay. We couldn't leave the store. We were stuck in GameStop for 3 more hours. There's nothing to do in GameStop for 30 minutes, regardless, 3 hours.
Yeah.
So we were bored. So bored. I think eventually we ended up just playing those like demos that they have.
Yeah.
I think we literally played that for like 2 hours straight because there was nothing to do. We couldn't leave the store with, the equipment for some reason. And they said we couldn't leave it there and come pick it up, like put it under my name and pick it up later with show the receipt. I don't know why we couldn't do that either, but we literally were just stuck there until Jin's mom was coming back from the mall.
Yeah, because mind you, this was back when I think we were high schoolers, and so none of us had a car. we
Yeah,
weren't big boys.
yeah, we didn't have a car. We didn't have, a driver's license because for us, we didn't have a need for a driver's license yet because we were in high school and our high school was fairly close to our housing, so we could just walk home.
Yeah.
So we really didn't need a license or a car or anything, so we were kind of just stuck.
And I
And
think
boy, let me tell you,
oh,
it's like being like, I don't know, stuck in a, let's just say, let me think of a scenario.
stuck at your relative's house who has no technology whatsoever.
Yeah, or get stuck at like your grandmother's house. They're old school. They don't have really up to date technology stuff. And you're stuck there for like 3 hours and you can't leave.
Yep, that was basically how it went.
Yeah.
And I also remember when you bought it that you didn't use a credit card because one, you didn't have a credit card. I think during the time you just paid out straight cash.
No, I had a debit card.
Oh, you had a debit card. That's what. Oh yeah, now that I remember, you did pay in a debit card. I was trying to remember if you paid in cash or debit card. So it was a debit card. Yeah.
Yeah, I used my debit.
Well, I remember when you were making like, ooh, like
Yeah,
even when you swiped it, you were just like, ooh.
yeah, I remember I was at the register. I was about to pay for it. You were there with me, and the cashier is like, "Yeah, your total's 500 something or whatever." And in my mind, I was like, "Ooh, that's gonna hurt." And then I swiped, and I literally looked at you. I went, "Ooh, my wallet hurt."
And I remember I had to comfort you. I was like, don't worry, the purchase is worth it. We'll probably never see this like deal ever again.
Yeah, but in my mind, I was like, once I swiped that card, I was shaking. I was like, "Oh man, that was a lot."
And then you were excited. You're like, I finally did it.
Yeah, and then 20 minutes later, after I got over it, I was like, I have the console.
And then finally my mom finishes whatever she's doing. And I think also what contributed to the fact that she couldn't come right away was I think I couldn't even like she wouldn't pick up her phone. I think that was like the main reason why we couldn't go. She wouldn't come right away. That's what I remember. It might be wrong though. It might be just because she was really busy or something like that, and she still wanted to shop. And so finally we get the game or we get the consoles, and you go off on your merry way, and you finally do whatever you needed to do. And so that was a wild thing because that was like back then. That was one of the biggest purchases that you've ever made.
Yeah, wait, can I add something else to that story?
Oh, go ahead.
So after, your mom dropped me off at my place, I was like, yes, I have the consoles. I didn't have a TV. Remember I had to borrow your TV for a little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I got home and I texted you. I was like, ooh, I don't have a TV. And you were like, are you serious? I'm
I was
like,
like,
we had one TV in the family room, but my mom was always on it, so I couldn't really use it. And I was like, yeah, can I borrow your TV?
and I was like, sure. And the problem with that TV but here's the thing: that TV is old. Um, by the way, I still have that TV. By the way, my dad's using it.
Really?
Yeah. And so this TV was from like this TV was like the step between like remember well, I don't know if whoever's viewing this or not, and when we're looking back, but do you remember those big TVs back in like the 2000s?
Early 2000s?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like those, like it would be a huge 40-inch, like bigger than a 40, maybe 40-inch or more, right? But then like the whole backside of it is just like a ton of like like the electrical wiring and stuff because it required a lot of power, right?
Yeah, it was one of those beefy dinosaurs.
Yeah, so it was like those existed still during that time, but then you know around that time period is when flat screens started slowly coming out. Not exactly flat screen, like it got smaller and smaller, and basically compact enough where you can move it with your own, like one person can move the entire like 40-inch screen, right? It was getting to that point, but it was still really heavy, and so my family had one of those TVs, like those more portable ones, but it's still on the older side, and yeah, it was really old. And I remember when you were like, I don't have a TV, I was like, well, I have one, right? I don't know if it exactly works because we haven't used it in a very long time during that time. And yeah, so I was like, yeah, just, come over and try it, right? So you brought your Xbox, I think.
Yeah, I brought it over.
And then we tried it out and it worked. And so you're like, can I borrow it? And I was just like, sure, if you can, if we could even fit that in the car.
Yeah.
And
We
so I talked to my mom and she's like, yeah, sure, whatever, he can borrow it because we're not using it, so what's the harm? And so we kind of like lugged it over to the car, got all the way to your house, and then like worked together to lug it all the way up to your room and I think it was your room, right?
Yeah, it was in my room, which was up a flight of stairs, I might add, so that made it even harder.
And then yeah, like you ended up using it for quite a bit until you texted me out one day and you're like, hey, I got a new TV.
Yeah, I remember or I might have called you, or did I text you?
I think it was a text.
Oh, I might have texted you, but when I texted you, in my mind, I was about to be like, ooh, I just bought a TV and it was another $500. But I texted you, hey, I got a TV. You can have yours back. Thanks for letting me borrow it.
Yeah, that TV, by the way, the graphics look terrible on it because it's such an old style screen. Um, I mean, least to say though, it it held you over for until you got your new TV.
Yeah, I think I borrowed it for like, what, 2 months maybe?
Yeah, which was no problem really. And so, the next story is pretty much related to GameStop again. This one's a really short one, but a pretty funny one, I would say. It's one of those dumb moments that I've had. I've had many dumb moments over my lifetime. Many of them were shared also with, Saki over here, but one of them is just, I think it's downright hilarious if you think about it in like retrospect, is that, I think one time we were gonna go to GameStop again because you were looking for a game or something like that. You were, because there was a specific GameStop in a very specific area where like they had like frequent deals or something like that for, I think, the 3DS. That's what it was.
I think it was the 3DS, yeah.
You were like, yeah, this GameStop in particular has like a lot of the 3DS stuff, and they're usually on sale. So like, I want to check it out. I was like, okay, I'm down to go check it out, right? So I went there too with you. My mom had to drop us off again because we didn't have a car.
Yep.
Nor a driver's license to even make use of a car. And so we went there, and you were browsing off on your little 3DS collection, like you were trying to look for some stuff. And then I happened to spot what was called Final Fantasy, I think 9. It was 9 or 13. It's the one that had lightning in it. And it was during that time where I was just like, I really like lightning. I have no idea what Final Fantasy is about, but I really want to play the Final Fantasy with lightning in it, right? And so I was like, how much is this? It was $13. I was like, ooh, do I really want to buy it, right? And here's the catch. The way I'm telling the story is it's if I'm making the assumption, or you're making the assumption, that I have an Xbox, because this was for the Xbox 360 or Xbox One. It was one of the two.
I think it was 360.
Yeah, it's just like, I think it was a 360. Here's the thing: I didn't own any consoles back then. The only console I owned was a Wii, and never again did I own a console until recently. But that's a whole different thing to talk about. So I was looking at this game. It's like, I really want to play this game, and I really want to buy it, but I don't have an Xbox. And I looked at you, and I was just like, "Hey, yo, can I play this at your house?" And you were just like, "Yeah, sure." You were confused, but you were just like, I guess." Right?
Yeah.
And I was just like, I want to play this, but you're like, that doesn't make any sense. So you're using my because you're using my console game and to play a game that's a single player game. Usually you would play, we would play co-op games together, for that Xbox or whatever. And I was just like, it's fine, I'll finish it quickly, I'll play the game quickly. So I ended up buying it for $13 or something like that. It was cheap, and like, looking back at it, it's pretty damn cheap for a whole game. But we get to that part where we get to your house, right? My mom dropped us off at your house, right? And I got all excited. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna play this game, right? And I start playing the Final Fantasy 14, and then 1 hour later, I'm like, oh, I gotta go home, right? So I go home, and I was just like, and I thought about it, and we were talking to each other, I think over the text messages or something like that. And I was just like, yeah, I don't think it's actually feasible for me to actually play the entire game, right? Dumb little me thought I could play the entire game and get use out of it. Turns out I couldn't, and so I was like, you think I could return it? And I think you were like saying like, yeah, I think you might be able to return it, but you have to do it within 2 weeks, right? Here's the thing: I did not go over to his house for like the next 2 weeks, and I left the game at his house.
Yeah, because what were you gonna do with it if you took it?
Yeah. So after that, we forgot about it, and that became a $13 purchase that went nowhere. Never again did I ever play, and I never played the Final Fantasy series again after that point. So that's dumb little me making that little mistake, of purchasing a Final Fantasy 13 game. I think it was 13 or 11. It was like 13, 9, or 11. It was one of those three numbers because it had lightning in it. And so yeah, that was my wasteful purchase, I guess. And so the next story I want to get at, I think you should start this off because you were the one that really, I guess, like, this happened without my knowledge until I finally discovered, or like I finally found out later until you were well into it. Like, well into it. I didn't know until then. So would you like to discuss about your, Amiibos?
Yes. So I am a collector. I like to collect things. it's a curse I have to live with. I collect things called amiibos, and if for the ones out there who don't know, they're little figures made by Nintendo, and you can use them to get like in-game stuff. I particularly got the Super Smash Brothers series of amiibos. So at first, my thought process was, oh, they're making these little characters for every player in, the Super Smash game for the Wii U at the time. And I was like, ooh, that sounds interesting. Maybe I'll just get the ones that, the characters I play. So I started off with that. I really liked, I don't know why, I liked Dr. Mario. So I started with Dr. Mario and Marth. And then all of a sudden, an urge in me said, gotta collect them all now. And I was like, God damn, you're right. And so ever since, I just started collecting all the ones that, were out and or were going to, come out later. And so I started collecting them. I had maybe like a dozen. And then Mewtwo was the next character to come out. And I was like, ooh, I don't have that one yet. So I went to Target with a couple of my friends. This was, before Jin knew about this. So I went to Target with a couple of my friends and I saw Mewtwo on the shelf. And I was like, wait a minute. Mewtwo's not even available till the next day. This was a Thursday I went, and Mewtwo would have been available on that Friday. So I was like, oh my gosh, no way he's available. So I immediately purchased him. After I purchased him, I might add, I guess maybe the manager in like the electronics section came out. He's like, oh, we're not allowed to sell those yet. And I was like, but I already purchased it. And it was the only one on the shelf. So someone messed up and accidentally put Mewtwo out before he was supposed to be available. And I already purchased it. And I'm like, I ain't giving it back. And so they were just like, all right, well, don't put any more. They told, the worker, don't put any more out or anything. So I guess I got one a day early, which was nice. And then I told Jin about it. I was like, hey, I'm collecting these little figures. If you randomly come across one, just shoot me a text saying, hey, there they have this one. And then I would go get it whenever I had free time.
And if I had to interject here, I first discovered that you were collecting amiibos when I came over to your house after a while. Again, this was one of those periods where I didn't go to his house for a while, and then I finally went over again. And I go into his room and I was just like, what the heck is all this? Like, what is this, like, wall filled with figures? At this time, I didn't really know about amiibos. I think I vaguely had an idea what amiibos were, but, like, I didn't really care about them because I didn't own a Wii U. Because this was mainly with the Wii. The amiibo started with the Wii U. And so, I had no idea what it was all about. And I was just like, what is this? And you're like, yeah. And you're like, yeah, I'm collecting all the amiibos. I'm like, oh. And you're like, yeah, it's for the Smash Brothers. And so I was like, oh, okay, that's cool, right? And then this was I came to know about this when I was in junior year or sophomore year. It was sophomore year, I think. Yeah, I think it was the sophomore year of my high school, which was around 7 years ago. And so I was just like, oh, that's cool, and you were talking about, how like you collect all this, and I was like, oh yeah, that's really cool, right? And then you told me how you trained all those amiibos to like, because like here's the thing with amiibos, they also functioned as like a kind of like a I guess data saver thing, data profile kind of mechanism where each amiibo has like a save data associated with it. And what happens is if you connect that amiibo to a specific game that it's made for, it'll have a save data and related to that. And for Smash Brothers, the amiibos have the save data that are related to the CPU. And so what's unique about this, amiibo CPU type deal is that it doesn't just act like a CPU. When you fight it, it acts like a complete newbie, like, character. It has no idea what it's doing. It's just doing its best. And anyone, like even a 4-year-old, could pummel the living hell out of a, beginner amiibo. And so what was unique with the amiibo is that every time it fights you, it learns what you do, and it gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So let's just say, for example, on Mario, you spam the smash button, and when you spam the smash button, or when you use the smash button on Mario, he throws out a fireball. And so when you constantly use that against the CPU starts realizing the Amiibo CPU, might I add specifically, the Amiibo CPU starts realizing, hey, this person, the opponent that I'm going against, is constantly spamming the smash button. I will come up with a response against that. And so through trial and error, it keeps on coming up with new responses every time. So let's just say you spam, the smash button, which throws out the fireball constantly, and it finally learns I should jump over this, or I should deflect it, or I should block it. Well, now if you run up to it, whatever, if he blocks it and you run up to him and punch him for block and punish him for blocking, or he jumps over it and then you also jump and match him to punish him, then it will restart the process again, saying I have to learn this again. So if you just keep on doing that, it's basically trial and error. And then here's the issue, or here, not the issue, but here's the thing about that. Instead of the traditional 1 through 9 levels that CPUs generally would have without the amiibos, non-amiibos, Amiibo CPUs have levels 1 through 99.
No, it went to 50.
It went to 50? I thought it was 99. Whoops. It went to 50 then. And so you can imagine how hard these Amiibos get. And then you told me, hey, I've been training all these Amiibos. And I was like, oh, really? And like, you were like, you want to go against one? I was like, sure. How hard it can be? Boy, was I wrong.
I know where you're going with this.
And so he was like, why don't you try out against Dr. Mario? I was like, oh, yeah, seems easy enough, And you're like, okay, in your, you were acting normal, but I bet you in your mind you were just, ready to laugh. And so you put me against Dr. Mario. It was, we always go with the rule of 3-stock, match types with no timer, or no timer? Yeah, no timer, I think.
No timer, no items.
Yeah, no items. And so I was like, this should be easy. I'm gonna choose Ike, right? Less than a minute, I lost all 3 stocks. I lost it within less than a minute.
Can I add something too?
Go ahead.
Okay, so Dr. Mario was my very first amiibo, so of course he was the most cursed to play against. I made him spam I think it was B, where he throws out the little pill, like how regular Mario would throw out a fireball. Yeah, he learned how to spam that for like most of the game. He learned how to meteor smash, and then after he killed you, he taunted. You looked at me like, did you teach him to taunt after every kill? I'm like, and I looked at you and I went, yes, I did.
And then I flailed so much. By the way, I never won against any of the Amiibo CPUs. I'm not a great, back then I wasn't a great, Smash fighter player. I was just like kind of the, brain dead, mash buttons, hopefully win type deal. And so, yeah, I got my ass beat by CPUs, and you were just loving it every time because you were the one that you're like my child.
My creations were unbeatable. They were actually unbeatable, except to me, because I was able to beat every single amiibo at least once. But if any of my friends, because I've had multiple people fight my amiibo besides Eugen, no one has ever beaten an amiibo except me.
I think the closest I ever got was 2 stocks, and then I lost.
Yeah, you got extremely close. I forget who you were playing with. You got extremely close. I started sweating. I was like, oh my gosh, is he gonna do it?
And then I flubbed
and then you just got you got destroyed because it was 1-to-1.
Yeah.
One stock left, and you just got destroyed. And I was like, in my head, I was like, dang, that was close. But in my head, I was like, whew.
You're like, nice try. And you're like, thank God he didn't beat him.
I'm like, unbeatable. But in my head, I'm like, oh, thank God.
And so, going on with Amiibo. So, it was during that same year, during the summer, I decided to go to Japan. And, I told you about it. And I was like, hey, I'm going to go to Japan, right? I was like, do you perhaps want any souvenirs if I can, get any? Because I didn't know exactly if I could. And so you were like, yeah, could you look for, this specific list of amiibos? And I believe it was King DDD, DK, or Donkey Kong, Toon Link, and Diddy Kong, right? Those were the 4 you were looking for.
And Bowser Jr.
And Bowser Jr., or 5, right?
Because those I believe were out a while ago, but they didn't. And I haven't seen them in the States before, so I was like, hey, maybe get it from the source, Japan itself.
And also, when you looked online, they were extremely expensive.
Oh yeah, they were like 50 a piece, and amiibos are usually like 12.
And you were like, I ain't paying that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm gonna collect it, but I ain't paying $50 for a single one.
And so I went to Japan, did all this stuff, and I'm forgetting what store it was. Let me see if I can look it up right now. You might, pardon the audio if you might hear this, but Japan Umeda. What was that? What was that? What store was it called? Yodobashi. It was called Yodobashi. Okay, so I went to Japan and I was in the Osaka area. I lived there for a while, and so there was I lived like in a small area, but it was Japan's how do you say this, railroad work system is massive and well maintained, right? Unlike America, where we live, where basically no trains exist in terms of actual transportations for human transportation. And so but in Japan, you can take trains almost anywhere and like wherever you want to go, as long as you have the money for it, to get there. And so in Osaka, there was a major shopping district area, not district, but like a city called Umeda. And at Umeda, at the heart of the train station at Umeda station, right next to it is an electronics store called Yodobashi Camera Multimedia Umeda store. And it is ginormous. Like, when I mean ginormous, I actually mean ginormous. It is 13 stories. And you're like, 13 stories? That sounds like nothing. Like, compared to most buildings, or not most buildings, but like a lot of buildings in America, because, America likes tall things, but, But keep in mind, this is a department store. 13 stories with multiple stores in it. It has a food court. It has, electronics. It has everything in there. And so, Yodobashi specifically occupies 6 of the floors. From B2 to basement 2 to 4th floor. And so, in there also happens to be general goods, or, things related to whatever that you can think of. It's basically a general store, even though it says multimedia, or camera multimedia Umeda store. But I went in there multiple times, just to browse around, because I liked looking at stuff. And so one day I happened to come across, during my times there, and during my time alone there, I happened to come across the Nintendo section that I hadn't seen before. And I was just like, oh, the Nintendo section, why not check it out, right? And see what they have. And I believe Xenoblade was during that. Just a side note, I believe Xenoblade came out during that time. And so they were having a promotional stuff for that. But I remember looking and I was like, oh, there's an Amiibo section here, right? And I was just like, wait a minute, this looks familiar. And I remember texting you, I think it was by Kakao Talk, because I could not use SMS during that time, like the actual, service provider, or else I would get charged an obscene amount of money for texting overseas.
Yeah.
And it was like the one time I forced you to actually download a different communications app.
No, you didn't. I had it because my grandparents
yeah.
are Korean and they use that. So that's how I communicated. So I already had an account.
Oh, yeah.
You did ask if I had heard of that app, and I was like, yeah, I have an account, so I just gave you my info.
Yeah, okay. And so this was during, I would say, around close to 12 o'clock when I went there. Like 12 or 1 or 2 o'clock. It was within that time frame. It was noon. The thing is, when it's noon for me there, it's like nighttime for you.
Yeah.
We're getting very close to nighttime. So I remember just texting you, like, Kakota. I'm like, hey, which one did you need again? It's like, the Amiibos, because I remember, like, suddenly remember that you needed Amiibos. You're like, well, I needed, like, Toon Link, King Dedede, Donkey Kong, what was the last one again?
Jr.
Bowser Jr. I don't think King Dedede, or Diddy Kong was an option during that time.
It was, but the other ones were the most expensive at the time, and I was like, oh, if you can find it for cheaper, that'd be great,
And I just remember texting you right after. I was like, hey, they're all here.
Yeah, I still remember you texted me a picture, and it was like an entire wall. Like, they had every single one, and I was like, oh my god, if you can bring back every single one I don't have, I will love you forever. But I knew in my head, I was like, I know you can only bring back like maybe 1 or 2, so I was like, get the most expensive ones that are in America, technically the most expensive.
Yeah. And
So yeah.
so we were going back and forth, right? And then suddenly I stopped texting you. I didn't like it was just like discussing whatever you right. After you told me get the most expensive one, right? Because you only expected me to get one. I was just like, all right. And then like I stopped texting you after. Um, and then a couple, I think like maybe an hour later, maybe a couple minutes later, I was just like, I got these, right? And I sent you a picture. There was three of them I got you.
Yes, I still remember
It
that.
was King DDD, I think, Bowser Jr. and Donkey Kong. Those were the three, I think, right?
Yes, exactly right.
And you were just like, "Oh my god, you got three of them, right?" And
Hmm.
here's the thing though. Before that, I even texted him. I could have gotten four. I could have gotten Toon Link. But the issue was that during that time, I completely forgot to keep track of the train fares because in Japan, every time you use a train, obviously in any public transportation, you would pay a certain amount of money depending on the distance you go. They charge more or less, and so I didn't remember how much I paid to get to that point and to go back, right? And so I was just like, gosh, I don't remember this, right? So I was looking at the money I had. I was like, do I have enough? Do I have enough? Um, and I was just like, I for sure have enough for three, but do I have enough for four? And I was just like, damn, I can't do it, right? So I was just like, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to leave out Toon Link. They had Toon Link there, but I was just like, unfortunately, I just can't get Toon Link because I did not know how much money it would cost. I did not find out until later that I had clearly had enough money to buy Toon Link and also get back. But at that point, it was already done because I think when I bought those, I was already getting close to the day I leave Japan. So it was like a couple days before. And so that was my last visit to the Yodobashi Camera Multimedia, the Umeda store. And so I was like, unfortunately, I can't buy them, you know. And I remember like being puzzled. I was like, at one point, I was like, hey, isn't your like I know like there was talks about like like the region locks whatever isn't Amiibo supposed to be region locked? You're like nah, they ain't region locked. Remember that?
Yeah, at first I was like, "Ooh, you're right," and I googled it, and it was like, "No, there shouldn't be a region lock." No, and then I was like, "Yeah, no, you're good."
Buy them.
Yeah, because actually later on I figured out after kind of COVID hit, um, how the states get amiibo is literally through Japan. There's no more, North American version. It's literally only through Japan now. So
Hmm.
everything is shipped from Japan here. So even if you buy it in stores here, like you see them on the shelf in a store here in the States, it'll be in Japanese. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And so going back to the Japan story, I bought three of them, right? And I remember after my trip in Japan was over, I had the three amiibos, and I was just like, yada yada yada. Get back to I think now I get back home, right? And I think the day it might have been the same day now that I think about it, but the day after, and this was you were in college by that time, and so you had your own car. I think the
Right.
same day I got back, you drove over to get the amiibo to pick up the amiibos,
Yep. You were like, "Oh, hey, I'm back, by the way," and I literally was like, "Oh my god, okay, after class, I gotta go."
and then you just showed up. You're like, hey, I'm here.
And then I was like, "Hey, I'm here. I have the money."
And I think in total it was like $40 or something like that. It was pretty cheap.
Yeah,
Um,
considering one is like 15, 12 to 15, depending.
Yeah, and plus I went through that day, like that specific day, I went through that currency exchange because currency exchanges change all the time depending on the value of your country's currency. But I went with that day specifically, and so it turned out to be around $30, $35 around. So yeah, I just remember you just gave me the money. You're like, I'm so happy.
Yep. I was like, I was that meme of what's the dude from Futurama, the main guy?
Oh,
Fry?
yeah, yeah, I think his name.
Where you go, "Shut up, take my money," and he goes, yeah, that was literally me.
And yeah, that it was a pretty funny experience. And I mentioned this before. I mentioned before that we talked about Toon Link and how I couldn't grab Toon Link. Well, here's a funny story about that. And I think you might want to tell this one.
Yes, I will. All right, so Toon Link. Yeah, he could have got Jin could have got Toon Link for me, but he didn't, which is fine. I still appreciate that you got me the other three. I still have them and I'm still collecting to this day. But Toon Link at the time was like $80 online, and I was like, "Ooh, that's steep." And you're like, oh man, I could have got Toon Link for you. And I was like, damn. And
And
so I was
at,
like,
oh, Manny, at the time, we didn't know Toon Link was gonna skyrocket that much.
yeah. So I was like, oh, he was one of the rarest at the time. And I was like, hey, Jin, I'm bored. It was the weekend. I was like, I'm bored. You want to go out and go to a store called Book Off? And you're like, yeah, sure. So we went to a Book Off. It was a little far away. It was probably like 45 minutes away. And we were looking, we were browsing. Book Off is basically a used kind of collector's store. So they have like comic books, movies, figures, games, pretty much everything, a little bit of everything. And so we were going through, we were browsing, and we went through the game section first, and we're like, no, we don't see any games we want for, on sale. I go over to the figurine section, and I'm browsing. I'm like, oh, hey, look, they have, amiibos for, like, used amiibos for sale. And I'm looking, and I'm like, I literally just went, and I called you over, and I was like, Jin, Jin, Jin. And you're like, what? I'm like, they have a Toon Link. And you're like, oh, it was $7. And I was like, Jin, you stand right here. Don't you dare move. I'm going to go get a worker to open this thing, and I'm buying that now. And you were just like, you literally were like bodyguarding that whole display case. You're like, no, no one can look until he gets his amiibo. I think that was great. So I called the employee over. He got the amiibo for me. I paid $7, so I technically saved 70. What? Is that over $70 on that guy?
Yeah, $73.
$73. I was so happy. I did not care what happened. If I got shot, I wouldn't have cared because I had my Toon Link amiibo.
And then that was the last amiibo you needed too, I think.
At the time, yeah, that was the last one.
It was so funny. Like, we did not expect that. Like, we did not even expect to see Toon Link in the first place. We just went there because we were like, might as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just happened to be that day when we went, Toon Link was on sale for $7.
Yep, I was like about to jump through the roof. I was so shocked that he was there, and especially for $7. I'm like, they obviously didn't do their research, otherwise they would have marked him at least 50. And I was like, I don't care. They're not. I guess they didn't do their research, or they didn't care enough. I'm gonna buy it for $7.
And I think it wasn't that I wanted to go to a book off specifically. I think it's because we wanted to go to a store called Mitsuwa. Because I remember I was like, hey, I want to, buy some stuff from, the Japanese market, right? And you're like, all right, let's go to the Japanese market. And then I was just like, and then, you were like, you want to go to stop by Book Off because it's literally the street over, the next street over, right next to Mitsuwa. And I was just like, why not, right? We're here, why not as well, right? And then that's when it happened. So really, this wouldn't have happened if I didn't during that time. I didn't want to go to the that would have never happened if I didn't had the feeling of like, hey, let's go to the Mitsuwa there, because technically there is no reason for us to go there. 90% of the time when we go to a Japanese market, we don't buy anything.
Yeah.
So it was gonna end up doing the same. I think we didn't even buy anything at the Japanese market, so we ended up just leaving empty-handed there, and then we ended up going to Book Off, and that's when we got the Toon Link, which was a massive coincidence on its own already.
That was a massive W in my book.
It was a W. Anyways, we're getting close to the end of the episode, and so yeah, that was our adventures. Just another one of our many adventures. And I do have to speak about Japan, in one of my episodes. I haven't told you the entirety of everything. Like I told you maybe bits and pieces about it, but I haven't told you everything. And there's so many things I could talk about during my time in Japan. Maybe we'll save that for the next adventure memories, And so, we'll be ending this episode today. So, I'll end it off here. So I'm Jin,
And I'm Saki.
and this is the Casuals, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.